Last week, the whole nation was shocked to see on our TV screens the incident of terrorism and rebellion in the heartland of Mindanao in Marawi City, where as we speak, lives are still being lost and innocent people are taken against their will. As a senator from Mindanao, I am appalled and indignant with the brazen manner that this Maute group, this group of terrorists, have occupied certain buildings and installations in the city, burned some buildings, and terrorized not only the people of Marawi, but even the adjoining provinces and cities. Yesterday, we had a briefing by the Secretary of National Defense and the NSA, National Security Advisor, both Secretaries Lorenzana and Secretary June Esperon. And yesterday, they showed us a grim picture of what these terrorists want to happen to us in Mindanao by setting up a wilayat or a caliphate, joining Indonesia, Malaysia, and Mindanao as one in the delivery of these areas for the Daesh or the ISIS. It showed us that almost all terrorist groups now have united as one to fight for the Daesh or the ISIS to set up this caliphate. And therefore, Mr. President, enough is enough. This group has just pushed back the gains we have achieved in the aspect of the peace process with the secessionist groups and for the economic development of Mindanao. We have taken great strides to bring development in Mindanao and pursue inclusive growth for our people, and this incident has brought us a step backward. I believe we should rally behind the President, Mr. President. This is a time for unity and courage. We should rally behind our troops like how we rallied for them during the SAF 44 Mama Sapono incident. We should show our people and the whole world that the Philippines is no place for terrorists. We have to use all constitutional means to suppress lawlessness and, once and for all, eradicate terrorism from our land without disregarding the paramount safety of the civilian population. We should fully support the AFP and PNP in fighting and neutralizing these terrorists and place them before the bar of law. These terrorists should fully account for the man-made disaster they are creating and the miseries they are causing the people of Marawi City and the rest of Mindanao. As a senator from Mindanao, I fully understand the President's frustration in dealing with the armed groups across all regions. We should take this as a chance to finally disarm them and deal with their sympathizers from some LGUs coddling these terrorists. With the declaration of martial law in Mindanao, it is hoped that any threat to national security and public safety will be neutralized. If we don't eliminate these terrorists, we shall lose the gains, Mr. President, that we have achieved for inclusiveness and religious tolerance that we have been working for so many years, together with the Senate President Pimentel, and Senator Manny Pacquiao, who've been pushing for this for many years. I hope one day, Mr. President, we can have a multiracial, multi-faith society, such as Singapore and Malaysia. These societies have prospered out of the productive economic, political, and social and peaceful coexistence of Muslims with people of other religions. Sabah, for example, has a Christian governor leading a Muslim-dominated state. Singapore, the busiest trading and financial center in Southeast Asia, is very multiracial, multi-faith society. Remarkably, both these societies flourish under a strong rule of law. The law is applied equally across all faiths. I believe, Mr. President, that Islam is a faith of peace. I have many Muslim friends, not only friends, but staff. Half of my staff are my Muslim brothers and sisters, who I consider sisters and brothers living in these areas. They don't share the extremist ideology of these terrorists. We know that a vast majority of Muslims do not like what is happening in Marawi right now. They also do not want the contagion to spread to other city centers like Iligan and Cagayan de Oro City, Davao or Zamboanga City. As a Mindanaoan, I know majority of our Muslim brothers and sisters want to achieve peace in their lifetime. So do we, Mr. President, their Christian neighbors. They don't want, and we don't want, our children and grandchildren to cower in fear of terrorists as what is happening rather now in Marawi and what has happened in Ipil and Zamboanga City. From these sieges, we should have learned our lesson. I would like to also highlight the number of our Muslim brothers and sisters who helped save so many of our Christian brothers in this conflict. Today, the story that really lifted my spirit up was from the owners of these 2 stores in Marawi, whose staff were Christians. And when they were asked by the ISIS to open the gates because they wanted to get these Christian workers of theirs, ang sabi po ng dalawang babae na may-ari ng mga store na yan, patayin nyo muna kami bago nyo kunin ang aming mga kapatid na Christian. We have to highlight this, Mr. President, to show that we should live together as one. We believe in each other. Mr. President, let us finish this menace once and for all. Thus, this representation stands behind the President, our Commander-in-Chief, in his declaration of martial law for Mindanao. May God bless the people of Mindanao, and may God bless the Philippines. Maraming salamat, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Senator Ontiveros wishes to be recognized, Mr. President.
Senator Ontiveros is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President and Majority Leader. Would the good sponsor yield to some questions?
Yes, I would be honored, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Article 7, Section 18 of the 1987 Constitution reads that the Congress, voting jointly, by a vote of at least a majority of all its members in regular or special session, may revoke such proclamation or suspension, which revocation shall not be set aside by the President. Is it the position of the good sponsor, Mr. President, that this resolution would validly substitute the requirement of a joint session?
Mr. President, to the distinguished colleague, I am not a lawyer, but in my layman's understanding of Section 18, and I've read it countless of times, baliktarin mo pa kung ano-ano pang anggulo, napakasimple nakalagay dito. The President shall be the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and whenever it becomes necessary, he may call out such armed forces to prevent or suppress lawless violence, invasion or rebellion, invasion or rebellion, period. In case of invasion or rebellion, when public safety requires it, he may, for a period not exceeding 60 days, suspend the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus or place the Philippines or any part thereof under martial law. Mr. President, it goes on by saying, within 48 hours from the proclamation of martial law or the suspension of the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus, the President shall submit a report in person or in writing to Congress. The Congress, voting jointly by a vote of at least a majority of all its members in regular or special session, may revoke such proclamation or suspension, which revocation shall not be set aside by the President. Mr. President, I have with me the minutes of the Constitutional Commission that was convened for the 1987 declaration. No other than Commissioner Christian Monsod was the author of the amendment to remove the affirmation needed for the 60-day ruling. It's right here with me, Mr. President. I have it right here, and I quote, I believe that at least for the first 60 days, which is a time fuse for it automatically expires at the end of 60 days, we should at least give the President the flexibility to act in cases of invasion or rebellion. So, Mr. President, and it was carried, that amendment was carried. In the debates of the 1987 Constitutional Commission, it was revealed that it was the intent of the body to adopt a non-interference policy of the presidential prerogative of declaring martial law for a period of 60 days. The joint session is required only if Congress deems it necessary to revoke or extend martial law, but not for concurrence. This is the essence of the Monsod Amendment adopted by the 1987 Constitutional Commission and as reflected by the current wording of Section 18, Article 7 of the Constitution. So, Mr. President, my understanding of that, we don't need concurrence, Mr. President, only for revocation. That is my understanding. I'm only one of 24 senators.
With the permission
Thank
of the
you.
gentleman and the lady, Senator Escudero wants to be recognized.
Mr. President,
Senator
as one of the
Escudero.
authors of the proposed amendment to the resolution, if I may answer the distinguished lady directly, the resolution does not even make mention of whether or not we should convene. It simply expresses the sense of the Senate insofar as its revocation or non-revocation is concerned. As I understand, we will be taking up another resolution filed by Senators Drilon, Aquino, Pangilinan, Trillanes, and Ontiveros, which will deal squarely on that particular issue on whether or not we should convene for whatever reason or purpose. Thank you, Mr. President. Just a point of information.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the good gentleman from Sorsogon for the point of information. Nonetheless, I rose to interpellate the sponsorship of the good sponsor of Senate Resolution 388. So, in response to the response of the good gentleman from Bukidnon, we also had occasion to refer to the record of the Constitutional Commission in order to ascertain the intent of the framers in Section 18, Article 7. In the debate as to whether a majority concurrence or a two-third concurrence is required, so please note the use of the word concurrence, not just revocation. It was stated that, quote, "This creates a very dangerous situation in the country, and the enemies of the state may try to prevent members of the Congress from attending a session just to prevent a two-thirds concurrence in the declaration of martial law." So it was also contemplated not only to revoke, but also to concur. I continue, that is the reason that this section requires only a majority concurrence. Records of the Constitutional Commission, pages 386 to 387. Clearly, Mr. President, if it was anticipated that there might be a risk of enemies of the state preventing members from attending Congress, what is contemplated is a physical session, not just a mere exchange of resolutions. The Monsod Amendment says that concurrence is not required to trigger martial law, but joint session is still required at a reasonable time. And if I would be allowed to refresh the memory of the good gentleman from Bukidnon, in 2009, in the discussions in our Senate on this very question, the good gentleman from Bukidnon said, and I quote, "Ito po, joint session, ay isang constitutional duty natin. Hindi po natin pwedeng hindi bigyan ng pansin itong joint session na ito dahil it will become bad precedents. Think about the future administration." I am sure the good gentleman from Bukidnon will recall his prophetic statement on the floor at that time, Mr. President. And so I return to my question, which it seems from the records of the CONCOM deliberations remains relevant. Does the Senate Resolution 388 mean that no joint session will be called, whether before or after the end of session, Mr. President?
Yeah. Because at that time, Mr. President, may I be allowed to answer? At that time, I was for revocation for that martial law declaration. I erred in my decision at that time. People make mistakes. If we run after these people with the full force of the law, maybe this would not have been this grave today. And now, I have seen the light. We've seen the briefing yesterday, we've heard the briefing yesterday. This is the first time that a key Filipino city has been taken over by the terrorists. Until now, they have not cleared it fully. Let's reverse the situation, Mr. President. Marami tayo na nakikinig dito na yan. Kung nangyari yan sa City of Manila and there were 100 sleeper cells, members of sleeper cells, taking over the City Hall of Manila, and the fighting hasn't ended for 1 week, you think we'll be debating about this now? About revocation or not? You think the Filipino people, lalo na sa NCR, they will be appalled, indignant of what has happened. Again, I will tell the good lady, I erred in my decision before. Because now I realize the gravity of the situation. This is happening in my homeland of Mindanao, our homeland of Mindanao, Senate President. As I mentioned yesterday, not too long ago, the bombing in Cagayan de Oro, which killed over 20 people, or just a little under 20 people. A good friend of mine passed away there. Board member Lagbas, who's may kinakapatid. We feel it every day. We feel this every day. So you have to know, you have to understand the passion of this representation. That enough is enough. And we feel that this president, who's from Mindanao, understands the situation on the ground, and that we should give him the leeway to do his mandate to protect the people of Mindanao.
Mr. President,
That's my position.
I understand and respect the passion of the gentleman from Bukidnon, but though his opinion may have changed, the Constitution has not. So do I take it that the answer to my first question is that this resolution would validly substitute the requirement of a joint session, that no joint session will be called whether before or after the end of session? Mr. President.
Mr. President.
If I may be allowed, because there are several authors of the resolution, all distinguished members of the bar,